Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Breen, and as the title suggests, this is Star Trek Revisited. I have a confession. You've seen some of my shorts, which are mostly comedy, but they're not really comedy. They're just like my observations, but exaggerated, because they're things that I feel I do legitimately. They're views I legitimately hold, but I sometimes present them in a way specifically to get a rise out of people, because, you know, it's how you get clicks, but also because I want people to pay attention to what I'm saying. However, while I have rather publicly mocked Star Trek, and a lot of times joked with my friends who are Star Trek fans, about the, Star Trek being PBS in space, etc., I don't really hate Star Trek as much as I let on. In fact, as a science fiction property, I have nothing but tremendous respect for Star Trek. And honestly, I actually like a lot more of it than you realize. However, I want to put some of this into perspective. Had I discovered Star Trek, the original series, on my own merits, like I had The Next Generation, which, by the way, that's my Star Trek. Captain Picard, that's my Star Trek. I grew up on The Next Generation. Love that show. Buy toys from it, read novels based on it, watched the movies, all of the movies. That was, to me, that's, when I think of Star Trek, I think of The Next Generation. To me, that's Star Trek. I know it's different to everybody, but when I think of Star Trek, that's what I think of. But that's not all I think of, because, like I said, had I discovered the original series on my own, I might have ended up enjoying it more than I ultimately did. And the reason for that is because very early on in my childhood, my parents figured out that I was obsessed, to an unhealthy degree, with Star Wars, as well as Transformers, which are both science fiction properties. And my dad, well-intentioned and well-meaning as he was, because he grew up with Star Trek and Lost in Space and Planet of the Apes and all that bullshit, wanted to introduce me to the stuff he grew up with, because, you know, I was born in '82. So Star Wars was on its way out. Star Trek was already done, gone, buried, and forgotten outside of a handful of movies sprinkled throughout the '80s, which we'll talk about. And then it got its revival in '87 with TNG, and then it would, go on from there. But I didn't have an emotional attachment to Star Trek. What I had was a dad who, for lack of a better word, sat me down and, more or less against my will, forced me to watch every episode of the original series with him. Same with the Adam West Batman, The Land of the Lost, Land of the Giants, Lost in Space, Planet of the Apes, etc., etc., etc. What this did, and the reason this did, there's two reasons why the way my dad went about it left a sour taste in my mouth, and I developed an aversion to Star Trek. Or at least an association, a negative association with the word Star Trek. Just those two words put together, I had a negative association in my brain. And it's because two things he did. One, he didn't give me a choice. He basically said, no, you're going to watch this with me and you're going to like it. And he did say, and you're going to like it. And he followed it up with, because it's just like Star Wars. Now, I don't know how he watched Star Wars in his brain and thought, oh yeah, this is Star Trek. I don't know how he got there. Now, he used that line on me multiple times in my childhood to get me to watch all kinds of rubbish that, spoilers, was nothing at all like Star Wars. But anyways, so, you know, as a kid, you know, you develop this, you know, especially once you get into your teen years, you develop this sense of, well, you know, my parents are making me do something. I don't want nothing to do with it. But here's the thing. I actually didn't hate what I saw of the show. I just developed that negative connotation. And I did watch some of the movies on my own. The Wrath of Khan, The Voyage Home, Final Frontier, The Undiscovered Country, and then the TNG ones. And I discovered The Next Generation on my own. But here's the thing. Like I said, I was born in 82. Next Generation started in, 87? I was, 5 years old? Maybe 6 years old? When The Next Generation was getting off the ground. So, yeah, I was watching The Next Generation, and I think that is what prompted my dad to want to push me to watch the original series, because that's what he grew up with, and he, I guess in his brain, assumed if I like The Next Generation, that automatically means I'm going to like the original series. Now, at some point in the 90s, I lost interest. Next Generation lost me. It got boring. I never watched Deep Space Nine or the other one, and I can't remember what the other one was called. Voyager? I think it was called Voyager. But then one day, randomly flipping through the channels, I stopped on this show, and whatever was happening looked interesting, and I sat there and I watched a little bit of it, and I got really into it. And then as the commercial bumpers came on, and the episode ended, and I figured out what was happening, and then the next episode came on behind it, I realized I was watching a show called Star Trek Enterprise. And I was like, oh, it's another Star Trek. So I was, okay, alright, this isn't terrible. This isn't what I thought it was. Now, during the 90s, I was really big into video games, playing a shit ton of video games. But I was also real big in reading books. And I read every Star Wars book that I could get my hands on. And I read other sci-fi books, and fantasy books, and swords and sorcery books, and fairy tales, and, you know, just all kinds of stuff. And so one day I was at a bookstore, and I came across this Star Trek book. It was based on the original series, but I don't think it was based on an episode, an actual episode of the original series, but it was set in the original series universe. And so I bought it, I read it, and I really fucking liked it. And so I realized, as I was reading more Star Trek novels, I actually really liked the novels. And aside from, like I said, my aversion to the original series because of my dad forcing it on me, and having the association that Next Generation was my Star Trek, and as a kid in the 80s I took ownership of that, and so I rejected anything that wasn't that, and then eventually just naturally, progressively developing a stronger and stronger and stronger bond with Star Wars. You know, as the special editions, and then the prequels, and constant video games and magazines and comic books and toys and everything else. Eventually I started to shift into, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan. Star Trek is not for me. Now, I have had friends over the years that I've had good, deep conversations on science fiction stuff, movies, theoretical stuff based on what we knew, our own experiences with science and astronomy and stuff, physics and stuff like that. Comic book discussions and video games and everything else. And eventually Star Trek comes up. Or inevitably Star Trek comes up. And so I have had enough exposure to Star Trek that I have asked every single one of my friends who are Star Trek nuts, and I use that term sort of affectionately, not derogatorily, based on what you know about me. Star Wars, The Matrix, the superhero movies, the Terminator, etc., etc. Which Star Trek would you recommend I try? Every single one of them gave me the same answer. They said the one Star Trek series you're most likely to like, and they were right, it was the one I ended up falling in love with, was the Orville, which isn't even an official Star Trek series. But every one of my friends said the Orville is as close to Star Trek as we believe you're going to get. And they were right. Because I did go back and rewatch the entire original series and all of the movies. Excuse me. And I missed the trash can. I deeply apologize for that. Yeah, it's just, as a whole, it's not for me. It's not my sci-fi. Now, I want to clarify one more time. That doesn't mean there's no Star Trek that I don't like or that I hate at all. I just blanket hate it all. So I'm going to give you some bullet points. Just briefly. I absolutely love 3 of the original series movies. The Wrath of Khan, the Voyage Home, the one with the whales, and the Undiscovered Country, the one where they go camping and where they blow up God. Those are great movies. I'll watch those 3. I hate, with a fiery passion, the original, The Search for Spock, and the other 2. I don't remember what they're called. The other 2. They're dumb. They're stupid. I can't stand them. The original series, of the 3 seasons, I would say, if I plucked out the individual episodes I like and put them together in a best of collection, I couldn't fill a DVD. I couldn't do it. I could probably come up with 5 or 6 episodes, maybe, that I legitimately liked and thought, yeah, this is good TV. This is good. The rest of it is boring as fuck. Now, the Next Generation, I actually liked, I'm going to say about 70 to 75% of the series. I liked not every season or every episode in a season, but I liked enough episodes in enough seasons that I could say that with confidence. That being said, there's only one Next Generation movie I like. And it's my favorite Star Trek movie out of all of them. I like it more than Wrath of Khan. It's First Contact. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only Star Trek movie I need in my life. Out of the reboot series, I guess you could call it, the, Kelvin timeline or whatever they call it, I liked the first one. The other 2, I was just like, I'll pass. I watched them. I erased them from my memory. I have no desire to rewatch them. But that first one, from 2009 or whatever, yeah, that one's okay. That's passable. So that's a more because I want to clarify, because I know some people see me on my other channel buying Star Trek toys. Spaceships, model kits, action figures, and I do have some Star Trek video games, which I'll talk about later. And they're like, but I thought you hated Star Trek. And I'm like, well, I do. As a whole, I hate it. I fucking hate it, because it's boring as fuck, and Star Trek nerds are obnoxious about it. But I don't hate it so thoroughly I can't enjoy some of it, if that makes sense. I despise most of it enough that I have no interest and no desire seeing any more of it. I'm not going to give it. You could tell me Discovery is the greatest Star Trek anything ever made. I don't give a fuck. I ain't watching it, because I'm over it. I don't need any more Star Trek. I've got all the Star Trek I require in my life, that I have room for in my heart, in my brain. I've already got it. I'm not dying for more Star Trek. But the Star Trek I do have, those handful of movies, those 24 episodes between the original series and the Next Generation, yeah, I'll hold on to that. I'll enjoy it. I'll revisit it. Everything else, y'all can have it. And yeah, I'll watch The Orville, because that's damn good TV.